ahead and get started. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, hello everyone. I appreciate you joining from whatever time it is and whatever part of the world you're joining us from. So this is the 2025 annual meeting for the education chapter. And as I say, thank you for being here. So just to give you an idea what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to start with a brief kind of discussion of things we've been up to last year. I know some of you may be familiar with this, but some there may be some things in there you weren't aware of, and a number of these webinars and such that we've done have been captured on the YouTube channel. So it's a good opportunity to go back and check those out if they're of interest. But the highlight of the annual meeting always is a chance to have a discussion about kind of what the chapter's been doing and ways that the chapter can improve moving forward. Specifically today, we're going to have discussion focused on three different topics. One is the committee structure that we've been using in the chapter. We've been using that structure to kind of help work on chapter activities and other areas of development. But I think it's a good time to revisit that and see if we need to change that up in order to better accomplish what we'd like with the chapter. We'd also like to have a couple of discussions focused on one kind of educational efforts, the challenges you face and how the chapter can support you there, and then secondarily with training efforts as well. And then finally, we'll conclude with looking ahead to some of the things we already have planned for 2025 and give you some things to be excited about. Ultimately, I think the purpose of this meeting is to have a good conversation about what the chapter can do to help kind of build community and help support you in your education and outreach and training efforts. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are on that. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of briefly some of the highlights from last year. We held three webinars. These are all, as I say, posted on the YouTube channel if you're interested in checking them out and you haven't had a chance to. Um, we also had a panel about the internship experience at Pawsey, both from the intern perspective and then also from kind of the mentoring supervising perspective. Um, back in the Back in the spring, we held elections. We're now on 2-year terms, so the current officer slate will be our officers for this year and into early 2026. And the later part of the year, we had a pair of workshops. So we had the CHEP workshop at PERC and the workshop at SC. We thank you all very much, those of you who submitted papers and who attended and who participated. I think the workshops are a great opportunity for us to come together in person as a community and get a chance to be built up by each other. And so I appreciate everyone who was able to participate in one or both. It's an even year, so we had our biannual education award. Congratulations again to Luis Costa, who was our award winner, and Henry Neiman, our honorable mention. Um, the award for this was presented on the award stage at SC24, which also I think is a great opportunity for our chapter to get some visibility, and also a nice opportunity for the larger community to see and acknowledge the hard work that many of us are doing in education and outreach and training, which I think sometimes otherwise can slide under the radar. We also had an in-person meetup at SC24, another chance to kind of get to see each other in person. I also wanted to add, even though this wasn't 2024, that we have a new blog post actually up today for the chapter. So if you're interested, I have a link here. You can also go to our website and click on the blog link at the top and check that out. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to transition to a discussion of the committee structure. And so I'm going to hand it over to Georgia for that. She's our secretary treasurer.
Good morning, or evening, wherever you are. Let me share my slides. Okay. Rearrange all the windows. That Zoom rearranges when you share your screen. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Fantastic. So uh, to the point of this section is to discuss whether to keep the committee structure as is or to simplify, and if simplification, into what categories. So the current difficulties we're facing with committees is participation hasn't rebounded in the same way post-pandemic. So it may be the case that the current committee structure isn't serving the needs of the chapter going forward. In addition, many committees creates confusion about getting involved, and I think it can complicate chapter activities. And it may be the case that the current committees don't capture chapter priorities. So I just wanted to open this discussion with the list of our current committees. So there are currently six. The Computational Science Education Committee is broadly associated with higher education or training activities in the space of computational science, not necessarily HPC, but computational science broadly. The K-12 Education Committee is for K-12, so kindergarten through 12th grade in the United States, which corresponds with graduating from secondary education and then going to university or not. So that aligns with however it works in your particular country as well, whatever that ending date for what the compulsory education usually is. And then third, outreach committee. Um, the outreach committee has been up to this point associated with things like the website, the blog, um, things that are about publicizing what the chapter does. Four is the workshop committee. This organizes the workshops that happen at conferences. Five, the systems professionals committee, which is associated with education for syspros, not necessarily HPC users. And then finally, the awards committee, which selects the chapter awards. So with that staging, I wanted to open the discussion to whether or not we see any redundancy in these committees, if they could be simplified into like more limited, larger committees, what would be the pros and cons of doing so? So first, does anybody have any thoughts broadly about the committee structure as they are now that you would like to talk about?
Yes, I have a quick question. So do you have any numbers for those six, committees? Like what has been, participation in the last few years, Like it will help like to see like where, which one might not be needed,
Mhm.
like a starting point for the conversation. Thank you.
So Scott, please correct me if I get anything incorrect here, but for the outreach committee and I think the computational science education committee, those are largely associated with the webinars. K-12 has really not resumed since activity shut down during the pandemic. The workshop committee is, I would say, the most active committee because it's associated with getting the PERC and the SC workshops together. And then the awards committee, I believe, is just for that biannual award. So it is almost like a temporary committee that comes up every 2 years, but doesn't otherwise have activity. And then I'm not sure. For the CISPRES committee, I don't know what the recent activities have been, but I think there's also a lot of overlap with ACM CISPROs. So I'm not sure if they've had the SIGHPC education chapter specific activities. So Scott,
Yeah,
would you say
yeah.
that's accurate?
I would, yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that, that the CISPROs is kind of more of a liaison. In some sense, they're kind of a sister organization, right? Because they're also a virtual chapter under SIGHPC. And we wanted to have some opportunities for communication between them. But that functionally, it's kind of more of a liaison where they're not necessarily organizing activities. At least this is what has happened in the past with us, but rather, you know, attending some of the meetings and just sharing with us some of the things they're working on and some of the challenges they're experiencing and such. Yeah. And as you said, the awards committee is something that comes together every 2 years to solicit nominations and go through that process. Um, but yeah. Could you leave it on this page, actually, Georgia? I think it makes it a little easier to have the discussion just to be
Yes.
able to see the, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you leave the floor open for comments for a minute, so do some wait time before moving into what I will propose for the restructure.
So I don't feel like any of those committees are redundant. given what they're focusing on. But at the same time, we definitely need more people involved to pick up the activity and get the momentum back again.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think redundancy is the right word here, but the way that I thought about this is what committees could be combined into an umbrella committee where maybe this particular focus would be at the project level. So, like for example, and I think an actual combination would be putting together the CSE committee and the K-12 committee into a formal education committee or education and training committee. And then there will be K-12 focused projects or higher ed focused projects or user-based training projects, but it all would fall under that education committee without the clear cut there. So they're not redundant, but we could have better participation and just a more clear organization if they were combined. And I think similarly, outreach and workshop might be a good combination. Um, and then the CISPROs and awards are they serve different functions in the first four.
I think
So,
another,
uh,
yeah, go ahead.
support, like what I'm seeing that maybe none of these should be canceled, but we should find a way like to better, support them, right? Like that's the bottom line. So by combining them, you are gaining that they have a better, visibility of each, other skills and, capacities like to do particular work, right? Is that
Mhm.
the goal?
Yes, and I think it will also reduce organization and leadership burden. For example, K-12 committee has not been picked up because the people involved with it, including me, just have not had the bandwidth to get those meetings going again. But if there was a larger education committee, then K-12 could be a part of that conversation without needing specific leadership to drive that forward. So it would just reduce organizational burden as well.
I think
I
that
would second that. And my observation is that, and again, this is not everyone, but a huge chunk of the people involved in both of these, at different times are working on projects that fit into either. A lot of people who do K to 12 work who are also doing training and vice versa.
Exactly. The lines are very blurred. Brian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, when you were talking, I had sort of instinctively thought of those sort of mergers as well, where 1 and 2 merge together into an education committee, 3 and 4 into outreach and training committee, and then I thought 5 and 6 would be almost like an external engagement committee,
Mhm.
because then you're consolidating all the leadership and keeping one core committee for each one of those three, but they can spread the load more easily. Because I also don't know how often these committees are overlapping with the activities. Like, do they happen at certain frequencies throughout the year? Do some happen more regularly than others? That was also something I was wondering about.
Mhm. I'd say the workshop committee has the most regular cadence because, the two conferences that we typically organize for are at the same times every year. So there's the summer with PERC and then the fall or November specifically with SC. So those are the ones that are probably the most regular workloads. And then the outreach committee is largely involved with, I think that committee drives the webinars. So that would be the second most active to me.
I think there's also something I've heard expressed that sometimes one of the barriers to joining and participating is that um obviously when you join a committee, there's kind of a indefinite period of time for which you're committing to volunteer for. And so as a complementary activity or just something to think about is there's also the possibility of kind of spinning up a working group for a specific project or specific, one specific activity on a certain date, and then it's done, right? That you volunteer to do this thing, you do it now. So, and it's tricky because obviously the chapter has some activities like the workshops that are a yearly thing, and you wouldn't necessarily want to do that, right? I think it makes more sense to have a workshop committee that is, has some institutional knowledge and can go through and do this every year. But I think that's also something that maybe we should consider is, if we have specific things, is kind of soliciting people who are willing to organize that, and then be done, to provide opportunities for participation that have a very kind of definite commitment and time period.
I like that a lot. I think it's a lot easier to get somebody involved if they know like exactly what they need to do and for how long. And I think that'd be a natural complement to consolidating committees because you could put like I am running this project for 6 months under the education committee that's focused around, I don't know, data science in high school education or something, for to design like a particular piece of curriculum, and that would then become a project within the education committee instead of needing a separate committee to run that project.
So let's see, if we wanted to make some changes here, I don't think, none of this is in the bylaws or anything. So I think this is something that we can kind of rearrange and uh and change at will.
Okay, so I think tentatively, I really like Brian's organization with the education, the outreach, and then the external engagement. I think external engagement is a great name for the last two together, and that also opens up possibilities for other external engagement, like with other professional organizations, stuff like that. And we have an umbrella to put it under. So does anybody have thoughts about those three groupings? We could kind of try that out. I will write up a proposal for that and send it around for committee or for group approval, if that sounds good.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Great. Does anybody have any final thoughts on the committee discussion before we move on to the next section?
Georgia, sorry for my ignorance, but I just want to know how exactly the committees operate currently. Like I mean, this was discussed, but I'm trying to process it. Um, how, I mean, who's involved and how is it operating currently?
So currently the committees operate pretty much at the direction of the leadership of that particular committee. So some like the workshop committee will have regular meetings around the projects that they're running. Often it can be fairly ad hoc where they just discuss on Slack or through other or avenues around how to organize. And then for I guess the point is that there's not like one way that every committee operates, which I think adds to the confusion.
Right.
So perhaps
Okay.
part of the consolidation can be identifying more of a structure for how a committee should operate and like what a committee actually entails.
Yep. Okay. Because I'm just thinking of objectives, what the committees want to achieve. Are these things clear or it's just ad hoc and we do it as we go kind of thing?
Those things are kind of described on the website. Each of the committee has a set of goals, and I think we ever try to create a list of different smaller activities and things people can volunteer for, to make it easier for people to actually understand which committee is doing what and what volunteer options are available. But I don't think we ever properly advertise those, so I don't think we actually got too much traction from chapter members that are not already part of different committees.
Yeah, I interpreted the question also to be about like the logistics of the committee, which was I think the part I was answering more than the content. As there's no common structure logistically between the committees.
This would be a good time to kind of revisit and make sure we have a clear charge for each of the committees as they're reorganized.
So I'll write up a draft and then perhaps we can open discussions on the Slack.
That would be great.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Veronica. I see that's um, opposed to the descriptions of the different committee activities. All right, thank you. Um, let's see. So let me go ahead. What we're going to do now is talk a little bit about some of the challenges that maybe you faced kind of on the education side. So for those of you that are doing instruction, whether it's as a formal course or in other contexts. So I got a Mentimeter together here. So let me pop this up. So if you guys would be willing to go and vote, we're curious to see what kind of challenges you're feel like you're particularly facing. So we've got the code up there at the top. Go take a whirl and let's see what answers come in. Let's give that a couple of minutes, and then I think based on these, Anna, one of our officers, is going to kind of guide a bit of discussion around this, both in terms of the challenges that you're facing, and then also in ways that the chapter could do a better job of supporting you through those challenges. So I'll leave this up for a minute so that people can do their thing. All right, I don't think anything new is coming in a minute. So, Anna, why don't you take it away?
Okay, well, am I okay? I'm on. Thank you all for sharing your responses. Okay, so I'm seeing here from the results, like a number one prominent is students have insufficient mathematical background. So can someone please share a specific, instance where this posed a barrier and how and what did you do to, address that?
I'll give a specific example with my high performance computing class. I get a mixture of students that typically take that, some of whom are computer science students, and some of them are more coming from kind of domain science and computational science. The computer science students, I would say, do not have the same mathematical background for any sort of, sample or toy problems we use that are more mathematical in nature. So a lot of what I've done to address it is I pick three or four problems that we reuse for lots of concepts over the entire semester, and I do a handout to all of the students, both describing the math, but also taking all of that and rethinking it in pseudocode with some worked examples so that the students who maybe, and again, at that level, the students who don't have the mathematical background yet, they're not going to get it in one semester, but that they can kind of jump straight to the code and think about coding ideas without necessarily having to worry about whether they fully understand the math or not.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. So the strategies that you just mentioned, did you follow up? I mean, did you see from the results, were they, effective?
Um, I won't say that I've done any sort of qualitative research studies to test that. The students seem to be able to grasp the problems, but that's entirely kind of my own personal anecdotal evidence.
Mm-hmm. And then, so how do you think that SIG HPC can help with this particular issue? Maybe, as you mentioned, providing pre-built, mathematical, primers or resources. Like, do you have any proposals?
So I think something that might be interesting, and I think we've done this in different, different people of us have done this in different projects over the years, is having a few of those, what are the equivalents of, not so much grand challenge problems, but class challenge problems? What are the things that really will get at conceptual ideas in modern computational science and HPC, but that are well suited to a 1 hour classroom lecture? And I think that's always a real challenge of finding that right that sweet spot of a problem that's open-ended and interesting enough to warrant the computational techniques, but something that can actually run on modest resources in a classroom and you can be done with in a class or two. So do we have, kind of our collection of what those classic problems are? Um, and I'm blanking on their name. Our compatriot group that's always scheduled against us during SC with their peachy parallel assignments, right? I think is a great example of collecting things like that. And I don't know that we have something similar specifically at, what are the problems to use to kind of help elicit these things, and what are the background that you need kind of packaged with it for a broad audience?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So jumping into that, I think we started discussing last year about creating a catalog of different scientific examples, more in the context of making sure we are teaching the users or the group of people with, actually using the examples they can relate to, understand based on their own backgrounds. So the idea was really to just create a catalog of different examples with proper descriptions and the context and prerequisites on assume background knowledge and so on, so that people, not just within the chapter, but also more widely can, both contribute, but then also reuse them in different contexts to make sure we're actually making education and training easier in the HPC context. So that's definitely something we can revisit this year and actually start collecting the examples properly.
Okay. Sounds really good. Are there more responses to this, or we can move to the next topic? Okay. Well, it is also clear that many students lack sufficient computational experience. So the question would be, what specific programming or computational skills do you find most lacking in your students? If somebody can share.
I can say something about that. And I don't really think it's necessarily about, either a mathematical background or computational experience or anything specific. I think the issue is that the people we are teaching have such diverse backgrounds that it's really hard to find the baseline and assume this is what they will know, all of them. I can go from this on and actually teach them new things. You can assume, but there will be always someone who's lacking some sort of subset of skills, and that make it really difficult to create coherent content and actually teach it in like a smooth, linear way. So making sure that you have examples at different levels and that you have a lot of complementary materials that people can use to catch up with things is really complicated, right? Because you end up building this massive catalog of resources and point different people to different things to make sure they can actually follow the content you prepared for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, are we familiar of any, repository of, beginner-friendly sort of, exercises that can help with this challenge? And if such a repository doesn't exist, did you hear about, somebody building it? And how we can help from SIG HPC?
So I think the carpentries are a good example of entry level content. And I definitely point some of my students to like different carpentries, depending on what it is that they're lacking. And there are a few other initiatives that are sort of aiming at sort of introductory level. So I don't think it's a matter of creating yet another set of materials. It's about collecting what other people are doing and how, and actually creating some sort of, proper catalog. And again, that's not something that's a not new idea. There are people trying to do exactly that and make sure there, all the content is properly tagged and so on. And that's like part of yet another initiative. And I think we probably have people involved in this on the call as well. So it's really just a matter of bringing all those ideas and efforts together and making sure people are aware of them. That's what I think, at least.
Mhm.
Does
Uh,
some does
Definitely.
someone I was gonna say, is
So,
someone involved with the HPC Ed effort think that that could help here?
I think Susan is on the call.
Uh, Me, Susan Maringer.
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, is in which part?
The catalog effort.
Oh, yes, as is David. I,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, we're both on that project, and I'm sure either of us would be happy to take all the time to talk about it.
I think one of our big questions, and Susan, you can say whether you agree or disagree. The way the current HPC Ed catalog project is focused right now, um, we ourselves have kind of had this big question of to what degree is that a project about training versus about education? And I think infrastructure wise, what's going to come out of that project can certainly handle a wide range of that. But that would be, I think, a big question is, is there value in the community to include both education and training in that? Um, I know that's a discussion we've had a lot internally so far, and a lot of our um, partners on that. If we look at our current partner list from what we're trying to get funded right now, I think we are including both education and training. Susan, what do you think?
Yes, I absolutely hope, plan that it will include both. Um, on the HBC Ed team itself, um, I don't think we have as many educators as we have trainers, but David, you certainly represent um, educators, and I believe at least one, yeah, one, possibly two of the other partners are also uh, teaching credited courses. So, I think we have the plans and the background to cover both.
So as part of my next section on training efforts, I have a Mentimeter slide that's how do you define training versus education broadly, and I think that might be a good slide to move here to this discussion because there's already been a lot of overlap between the two concepts. Scott, if you agree, can you add a Mentimeter slide that's a free response on how do you define training versus education into this,
Yes, I can
and
do
we'll
that.
we'll just interleave them. I think that might make sense.
I'd like to point out that we have a rather outdated list of shared materials on our website. So we've actually tried this before, many times over, I think. Um, but reviewing and maintaining that is one of the problems when we come up with, even if we come up with the facility to record where these things are. So that's always a challenge.
Actually, David would be the best person to discuss our plans on that as well.
So, yeah, that has been $1 million question. I think that was a huge thing with NSDL in terms of maintaining that. What was the real value added? And so what we would like to do with the HPC Ed training catalog is include, I mean, we do want to allow for things like user submitted reviews and issues of that sort. Um, but past experience without the right critical mass, do we get enough of that review content in organically? And do people choose to share it amongst the different collections? So we're going to include that, but we also want to look at some issues of provenance, if you will, where we can do some vetting of the initial catalogs contributing and have some degree of editorial decisions of catalog quality that can be used to influence what we think of in terms of individual items. And then finally, I think the last piece to it, we have this idea that we're kicking around is to what degree can we use AI to help improve some of that? And while we don't necessarily want to expose that directly to end users, our hope is that being able to provide that information back to, say, catalog maintainers who have a smaller collection is enough of a value added for them to want to participate in the QA process. Oh, we have a new hand.
Yes, yes, I've propped up this question that kind of Georgia was suggesting. So why don't we take a moment and reply to that?
I would add one more word actually to the definitions. There's education, training, and curriculum. And once people start talking about curriculum, then I'm definitely picturing a credited course.
I think it's a good point in the chat that somebody mentioned that learning is also kind of a concept that can be useful when you're trying to come up with maybe a broad category that can include a variety of these efforts. Definitely seems to be a trend of kind of a knowledge skill, like the first response, but I see that continuing in a number of these other replies. So
Well,
Georgia,
can you scroll
yeah,
down, or whoever's controlling the slides?
yes.
Oh, yeah, so that we can see all of them. Thank you.
Yeah, these are really interesting responses because there's both some consensus on education is more about theoretical foundation, training is about skills, but in practically, I'm not sure how we differentiate that for like a particular activity. What are the responses? Trainings come from research or resource providers, but education comes from the education organization. But what if the resource provider, uh, produces an activity that is about, um, just like something currently relevant to my group, about structuring machine learning problems to better use the resource, but is also like very rooted in the theory of how you need to set up problems in order to actually to get the correct result. So I personally wanted to discuss this question because I'm never sure like where to draw that line. And many classes can fall more into the training category by this definition, but they're like in the formal education space. So is that training or is that education? Is a lab associated with the theory class like a training extension, or is that still in the education space, even though it's purely skills based? So I think this is a very complicated question, actually, and I'm not sure where to draw
Well,
the line for myself.
does it matter?
I think it matters in that we uh, have discussed like, will the education repository also collect training materials? So clearly there is some fuzzy differentiation that we all have between the two, but I don't know if there's like a practical definition we can settle on that can really answer that question. Um, if that makes sense. But to some degree, I think that question is more like which produces materials that are feasible to link from the educational initiative, um, rather than like if this is a training, but it's like something that's very easily associated with metadata and linked to and made available online. Even if the original intent of the repository is for educational materials, does that still fit, for example?
Right. So, but it's not necessarily about whether something is a training content or educational material. It's whether about it meets the criteria of the repository or not. So we basically need a list of requirements we have of that learning material, however you want to classify it afterwards, right? Rather than being super strict about putting a label, whether it's a training content or education content.
Georgia, maybe this is a good time. I know you had some other things you wanted to kind of discuss around training, so this is maybe a good time to transition to that.
Yes, and
Um,
I just have a quick follow-up for David. So how far you are from completing like the database that you've been mentioning that you are working on?
Again, Susan, you can jump in here if you want to. We are finishing up where we are with our pilot phase of this. So we've worked with I'd say about 15 partners so far to start collecting information, work with them on how they can ingest their materials into the federated catalog. Um, and we have some rudimentary ways of sharing it. Our next big step in that process is having better tools than we currently have for how people view the catalog, how they embed it in their own website. We're to some degree that's going to happen regardless. We're applying for funding to hopefully be able to do that on a somewhat larger scale to have that available. But that's kind of I'd say our next big piece is improving the piece where you get to see what's in the catalog, search it more readily. And that piece is, I'd say, is still in progress. We've got beta level interfaces, but it's not yet where we'd want to be in terms of here's, three lines of JavaScript that you can throw into your website with a few options to configure it for yours. But that's one of the things we're working on with this and hoping to make more progress on over the next year.
Very
Um,
nice. Thank you.
I absolutely agree. I'll be a tiny bit more specific. If you want to add things to your catalog, we'd love to work with you right now. And the two methods that are really available right now are the very customizable um, JSON file with Globus command line interface, or the very simple fill out a Google Sheet template. We've got the two far ends are available right now. I'd love to talk with you. The For discovery, we have a beta catalog website, so anybody can go there now and use the filters to search and even download a simple HTML of the results. But I absolutely agree with David. We want more better ways to put things in and more better ways for people to pull select results out into their local web pages.
Okay, sounds good. I will be looking forward to see how that develops. Thank you. Scott, should we move with these topics of conversation or?
Yeah, I think maybe here, I'll stop sharing because I know Georgia
Okay.
has a couple of slides. And maybe because I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the training activities before we wrap up. So, Georgia, I'll let you share your screen, and I know you had a couple of questions for discussion.
Yeah, 1 second. So we've already discussed the first question. I thought thought that would be good on Mentimeter. I haven't used Mentimeter before, but it's nifty. Okay, now it's back. So we've already talked about this one, how to define training versus education broadly. What was there further slides on the more education conversation, or was that concluded, Scott?
Yeah, I
Just
think we covered what we wanted to cover there.
yeah. And then I wanted to have an open-ended discussion about what training activities had people done at your sites this year or your organizations, separate from SIGHPC education specifically. And specifically, what went well and what were the challenges with different modes of delivery or different topics. Um, so I will open it up to open discussion, but to set the format, I'll go first. So training for us this year at UMass Amherst and our associated universities um, was mostly centered around onboarding novice users. So we're doing a semesterly onboarding, like synchronous lectures for new users, and that has been going well. But our big challenges that we're facing is how to make these onboardings as useful as possible in a remote setting. So we have the added challenge where our team is really geographically diverse and our user bases as well, because our cluster is over multiple states. We serve the UMass system and University of Rhode Island, as well as several liberal arts colleges in the area. So there's no realistic way to do a training where we're in person and we can do hands-on activities with instructor support, like in the Carpentries model. So our big challenge is how do we make these trainings productive with the limitations that we're facing as far as remote only participation. Other than that, we have also done GPU specific trainings. We have always had a large number of GPUs, pretty unique to the HPC world, and they have just gotten more and more and more popular over the last year or so. I think you are all probably seeing that at your sites. But the big challenge there is resource access for anything that you need to do synchronously with the workshop, because relying on being able to get 40 people onto a GPU at once means that we either have to do a reservation and take resources out of cluster overall use for a period of time that is probably greater than the actual GPU resource of the workshop, or we risk people not being able to get GPUs in a timely manner for anything we try to do that's hands-on. So it's really limited our ability to do hands-on activities for like longer workshops. Who would like to share next? If there's anything you would like to highlight.
I would just like to ask quickly, group, is any of you familiar with this program for providing computational resources? It's called NAIR, NAIRR. So, yes. Did any of you apply for that, and was it successful? And can you share, experience with that program? Because I know I'm contemplating applying for that for my WHPC chapter.
I haven't applied. I know about it, but I haven't applied. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is, obviously finding, GPUs, right? It is a precious, material these days with the AI and, LLMs, that it simply, I know, must. So,
So one of your challenges is just kind of finding GPUs in order to do kind of conduct activities.
oh yes, yes. So we plan to actually provide, like hands-on trainings, specifically on, training, LLMs, and just giving some people, basis on that. But, although I'm associated with computational facility, we simply don't have that many GPUs that I can just, request like to take, a few of them for my trainings, for this chapter, So I need to go around and find computational resources.
I recommend, so one thing that's really helpful for at least small trainings where you're not needing like dozens of GPUs, Jetstream, the Jetstream 2 resource from Access is really good for that, because then you can set up virtual machines with GPUs on them that your participants can just log into and then shut them down afterwards. And they typically have better availability, at least in my experience, than the more HPC focused resources, because since they're an OpenStack cluster, it's kind of an oddity in the access space, and they're just not used as much as I think that they should be. So I personally have had much quicker access to GPUs on Jetstream than something like Expanse. I think just because not as many people know about it or how to use it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So it's this one, right? In the chat.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yep, it's a OpenStack cluster. It's fantastic for doing small trainings, because you can set up virtual machines for your participants in advance where they have access to the GPUs and they can just log in and do what they need to.
Cool. Thank you.
That's something that I think would be, and I know there are groups out there working to help get more information out there about this. But in particular, not just what resources Access has, but which ones are, have, easier paths for allocations for training. And again, how do you actually go about requesting it and doing it. I think that's I find myself using well, I was about to say using Access very little. I'm going to go and say I'm not using Access at all. Really not having a sense of how to go through the allocation process, particularly for say a classroom situation.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I'm in the same boat with Nair where I know I know it exists, but I'm not entirely sure like what the resources there are and where different resources are appropriate and how to get access to it. So a discussion of both of those programs would be fantastic and very helpful.
Since we're coming up at the end of our hour, I think we're going to transition to Veronica's slides, kind of highlighting some of the things for next year, just because I want to make sure we have a chance to share that with the membership. Um, so
Perhaps we can take more of the training and education discussion to the Slack and have asynchronous conversations about it.
yeah, I mean, I think there's some interesting, really interesting elements there that are we definitely want to continue to dig down into and continue to think about ways that we can, improve the, services the chapter is providing to help members wrestle with some of these challenges. So I think that's a great idea, Georgia.
Okay, since we don't really have that much time, I'll try to be quite quick. And again, if you have any ideas or, suggestions for other events that we can organize, please let us know either via Slack or direct email or whatever works for you. So what we are hoping to do this year, again, to the workshop committee, thanks to the workshop committee efforts, mainly Nitin, we're hoping to have 2 workshops this year, again, one at PERC and one at SC. The draft submission deadline for the papers and other submission types are in May for the PERC workshop and in August for SC workshop. We're also usually organizing chapter meetups at both conferences. And the question is really, should we try to organize something at ISC as well? Are people actually attending that conference? Is there a need for some sort of get together for the chapter members, or maybe we should be focusing on those 2 conferences? And if there are any other submission types that we should be submitting as a chapter, or again, whether people are just happy to submit different BOFs or panels or other submission types as individuals or as a group of different initiatives together rather than as a chapter. And finally, are there any other conferences and events that we should be attending as a chapter rather than individuals? The other events in the pipeline, we are hoping to have presentations from both Luis Costa and Henry Newman, who were the recipient and honorable mentions from the Education Award that was awarded last year at SC. We are also planning to have an interactive session focused on exploring opportunities that generative AI might be bringing into HPC education and training, and how it can be used, what the challenges are, and so on. We don't really have any details just yet, but we're hoping to organize it in spring. So if anyone is interested in being part of actual organizing committee, or if you have ideas for speakers, please do let us know. We also want to continue the global seminar series. So again, if you have a good idea for a seminar, if you know of both someone doing something really interesting that should be shared more broadly, please let us know. And again, one of the other things we were discussing last year towards the end of the year is maybe having a regular catch-up meetings between different initiatives working in this space to make sure there is a good exchange of information and people don't wait until another big conference to actually learn about the recent developments. And the final set of questions really, what are events should we be organizing both in person, maybe co-located with different conferences, but also online? If you would like to be part of a seminar series or know someone who you think would like to be part of a BS presenter, please let us know. And yeah, if you have ideas for a blog post or would like to write one, again, please let us know. And if you have ideas of how we can increase the reach of our events, again, that's something we would like to know as well. So yeah, that's a really brief summary of everything we want to do this year, and there are probably other things as well. I think the key message is that we are happy to organize more things if people are keen to participate and maybe help them organize as well. So, do we have any ideas or suggestions right away, or is it something you kind of need to think about a bit longer?
Can you go back?
I've got.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Firstly, I think the perk deadlines might be wrong. I just want to let you know, when I looked, I think it's like mid-February you need to submit the workshops and
Oh no,
tutorials.
the workshop, yes. I'm talking about the submissions for the workshop. So the papers we want to present at the workshop rather than submitting the workshop itself.
Oh, okay. And then, of course, there's always the annual conference in South Africa. If anyone has a desire or an excuse to want to come, it seems like even if I try to avoid organizing one, they want me to run an education BOF. And I always pull people in remotely. Thanks, Martin, for doing it at the end of last year. But that's always on the cards. And if we do it early enough, we might be able to do something more productive and meaningful than a 1 hour BOF.
And just remind everyone that's at the beginning of December every year, right?
Correct. It's normally 2 weeks after SC concludes.
I was going to say, Veronica, I think on the previous slide you talked about opportunities for, yeah, kind of the catch-up meetings. I think I think that could be very positive. I think a lot of good things happen when we're able to get together and have conversations. I mean, even like we did today, right? I mean, there's also value, obviously, in webinars and having presentations in that format too. But I think that the catch-up meetings are definitely an area that there's room for growth there. Beyond, just getting to see each other at the conferences or at the workshop. So I don't know exactly what format's best and all that, but I just wanted to say that I like that idea a lot. I think that could be really nice for helping to build community.
Yeah, and I think it will really help with knowledge transfer as well, because all of us we wait until SC to hear what other people are doing, right? And that's and after SC, there's like Christmas break and things just fizzle out, and quite often we never pick those conversations up again. So having a more regular opportunity to actually talk about different things that we are doing might be a useful and productive thing. But yeah, that's all I had. So I don't know if there are any other comments or suggestions around the future events.
Sorry, can you go back to the second slide again? Make you jump around.
You mean this one?
Oh, sorry. No, I mean the next one, I guess.
This one?
That one. Yeah,
That's
that
the
one.
last slide.
Last slide. Sorry. I mean, this last point's always kind of the sticking point, right? Is making sure that we are able to um, connect with people who are interested. Um, And so, some of that I think is advertisement, and some of that is maybe partnering with, other organizations to kind of broadcast our activities so that we get, a wider cross section of people. Um, and some of it might also just be that, maybe we make sure we have some events that, you know, don't require live attendance because we also span, many time zones, which is, I think, honestly, one of the strengths of our organization. We've worked really hard in the last few years to try to improve our international representation. Um, but sometimes I know that's a challenge too for live event attendance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we are trying to record everything that's happening online, but even then, we are not really good at advertising that things are recorded and where they are, where people can find it, and so on. So,
Yeah,
definitely something we can work on.
that's right, Brian. More pens. More pens is the answer. All right. Well, I know we're over our time. I really appreciate you all attending today, having these discussions. It certainly helps me, and I think all of us in chapter leadership to get that feedback and hear what would be helpful to people. And as we think about what we want 2025 to look like for the education chapter, it's really useful to have these kind of notes and discussions to reflect back on and look for ways to continue to improve the chapter's activities so that they better serve the membership. So just want to thank you all for coming. We will, as Veronica showed, we have a number of events coming up in the pipeline. We'll keep you posted on those. We've got the new blog post up today, so I encourage you to check that out. And I hope to see you all again soon.
And please share your ideas. We are always keen to get feedback and more suggestions.
Yes. Also, in terms of action items, I think George is gonna be distributing some kind of a proposal for committee reorganization and lead some discussion of that on the Slack. I encourage you to join the Slack if you're not there already, and participate and continue to share your thoughts in that once we get that up.
Where is the best place to share our ideas and suggestions?
I think if you're looking for kind of is feedback, I think the Slack channel is probably best, just because then that gives enough people an opportunity to reflect and respond. If you are kind of directly trying to reach leadership, I think all of our emails are up on the website. So if there's like a particular concern that you want to share or something where you want to make sure that one of us sees it right away, you can email us there as well. All right, good. Anything else before we close? Okay, great. Well, thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you all again soon, I hope.